right, I think we should get started. So, welcome everyone to our final episode on Beyond the Hype. And here we go. We are recording, and as always, please use chat for your questions. So here are the big questions that we are going to be addressing today, starting with what makes a question big? But first, loose ends from last week. There are several questions that I don't think I gave a good enough answer to, so I wanted to revisit. One of them had to do with the issue of hallucination rates. And I had found in one situation that Notebook LM was said to have much lower hallucination rates than others, at like 15%, and whereas other tools were in the 40% range. And that's admittedly high. So I did some more research, and I in fact used Gemini 2.5 Pro in deep research mode to look at the state of hallucinations. And it generated, I thought, a very impressive and thorough report, which I put a link to on this slide. And then just this week, Google introduced Gemini 3, an upgrade from 2.5, and I asked it about its hallucination rates, and it provided, I thought, a remarkably honest answer, and I linked to the results of that description as well. And one of the things that wasn't entirely clear to me before was that in these studies of hallucinations, they look at three kinds of answers. Was the answer that was given by the AI correct? Or was it don't know? Or was it fabricated? And the percentage, which is to say hallucinated, the percentage of hallucinations is the fraction of the not correct answers that were fabricated, not the total number of answers given. So Gemini 3 scores very high on correct answers because it has a larger knowledge base. It's been trained more widely, and so it answers more questions correctly. But for those questions that it doesn't answer correctly, it hallucinates more than some other models do. So I thought that was pretty interesting. One thing that's good to keep in mind is that rates vary widely depending upon the use case. And if it's summarizing a document, then the hallucination rate typically is very low. But it's worth taking a look at those links. Then there was a question about why would I use AI to do something simple like finding out about changing the light bulb in my Prius instead of just doing a Google search. And I didn't think I gave a very good answer, but it really comes down to efficiency and saving time. I could certainly have put the VIN number into Google search and tracked down the correct model and the correct part number, and then done the search on differences between LEDs and incandescent bulbs and so on and so forth. But it saved me a fair amount of time to just ask the AI to, given the VIN number, to figure out what I needed to do. So it's strictly a question of efficiency in this case. Now, if it was a question of deeper insight or debate, then of course clearly the AI is going to respond in a way that would be also more efficient than just tracking down links. And the links may or may not be accurate either, so you always have to double check your results. And then finally there was a question about will we learn how to do effective queries in this class? And I hope the answer was yes. I'd encourage you to go back to the section on prompting principles from last week's lecture. But I want to add to that and indicate that it's perfectly reasonable to do either a web search for your specific case, and there are lots of people that have created either documents or videos on what they think is a great kind of prompt. But you can also ask AI, and especially if it's a creative endeavor, like creating a scene, an image, or a movie, then asking AI to suggest a prompt would be a good first step. And also, it's worth noting that this whole area of what's called prompt engineering is evolving because the newer AI systems are getting better at understanding what we want. It's understanding our language better than in earlier versions. Some people say prompt engineering is not going to be the career choice of the future because these systems will obviate the need for that as they get better at interpreting our typically very vague requests. Okay, now let us proceed to this week. As usual, we'll take a break in the middle and hopefully have time for questions before the break and then before we adjourn at the end. So we'll start with what makes a question big. Now, if you look at this top box, attention level equals likelihood times impact. Those of you that have a background in enterprise risk management will recognize that risk level is the product of a likelihood of event occurring and what times the impact. And you could just think about it in terms of like low, medium, and high. And the objective of that is to try to figure out what kinds of issues deserve your attention. How do you prioritize, especially in the risk management context? So you could say, for example, that the likelihood of a 9+ magnitude earthquake in the next 24 hours is very low, but the impact would be very high. And so you still might want to pay attention to how you're going to respond to that. And you can, of course, go the other way around and say there's something that's high likelihood, but it really isn't going to make that much difference. Well, when we're looking at the impact of AI, we can follow the same kind of paradigm, but there are several different parameters we might want to look at. One is the scope of the impact. Does it affect just an individual or a community, an organization, a nation, or the entire planet? And the time scale, is it happening soon or midterm or very long term? And that could also apply to duration. Is this a short-term event or a long-term event? Then we could, of course, think about what type of impact we're dealing with. Is it economic or political, etc.? And then finally look at the kind of needs that it's addressing. And this is, you could also map this into Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. This is a simplification of that, but does it affect our physical needs, our safety, our emotional needs, or spiritual needs, whatever? And then ask yourself, well, who is it that will care about the answer? And will it matter if the answer doesn't come out the way they want it to? Well, in our next section, we're going to talk about the perspective of CEOs on what could slow down this juggernaut of the AI train. So it could be the CEO of the companies that are producing the AI systems. It could also be CEOs of companies that are using systems, AI systems, because some of those overlap quite a bit. But let's focus on if you're a CEO of like OpenAI or any of the others that are Meta or Google or Microsoft, and what are you concerned about with respect to the AI train? What might slow it down or derail it? Well, certainly resource consumption is on your short list of concerns, and these AI systems certainly consume a lot of resources. So you could be worried about money, investment levels, and we've talked about whether they're in a bubble or not, and the fact that nobody can seem to agree on that, or at least there's strong arguments on both sides of that. Energy is clearly a big concern, water too. We talked a little bit about running out of human generated data and now having lots of synthetic data around and the challenges that that can present. And then finally, talent, both the really high-priced talent of experts in AI and also the lower end of the scale of people that are training these things, looking at sometimes pretty horrific images to decide whether they should be blocked or excluded from the training set, etc. Next area that I think CEOs are concerned about is legal liability, and that could be relating to copyright issues. There are a whole bunch of copyright lawsuits that are still pending. Paula Samuelson, who's a copyright expert at the University of California, Berkeley, has been giving talks on whether or not copyright could, in fact, derail AI. And her answer a year ago was quite possibly. I'm not sure she would change that answer today. I heard her speak on a panel by the Electronic Frontier Foundation a few days ago, and she did say that there have been 3 important lawsuits on a crucial question of whether or not it is considered fair use to train your model on information on the internet that is publicly available but not public domain. That is to say, it is copyrighted and you don't have the right to copy it, but can you use that for training? In the 3 cases that face that question, in 2 cases, the judges decided that it was okay, that it was fair use. In the 3rd case, the judge says, absolutely not. That's theft. That's not fair use. So the jury is still out on that. And then the next thing that I would worry about if I were a CEO is disenchantment of users or customers or investors. And I'd be concerned about hallucination rates and deep fakes, as well as return on investment if it's an investor. And then, of course, if the disenchantment gets large enough, you're going to start seeing a backlash in the public perceptions and in politicians' response to that, and governments might lead in a direction you don't want it to. I referenced Pew surveys here. I don't have time to get into those, but in the latest Pew survey, there are more people who are concerned than excited about AI, and that gap has been growing over the last couple of years. and in several different categories, people think that it might actually be detrimental to their own abilities. So there's definitely a PR problem that has not been successfully addressed. So now our next big question is, what are the societal impacts? And we're going to focus on these three: jobs and privacy issues, and then all the variations of misinformation. So for jobs, what about the possibility of mass disruption? Or is it just going to be selective layoffs or gradual evolution? And what happens if a lot of people can't find work? What's the appropriate societal and political response? And same question for issues around fairness and bias and equity. So we do have CEOs who are really excited about the idea that they can not have to hire real people that go on strike or ask for more money and just use AI. And this article talks about one CEO in particular about that. This other article is about a company called Klarna. It's a buy now, pay later finance company. And they tried to replace a lot of customer service people with AI, and it didn't go well. They got a lot of negative pushback, so they started rehiring some of those. But the CEO is still very much on board with getting rid of as many of those pesky humans as he can. Now, another kind of pesky human from the perspective of some people is the actors and actresses in Hollywood. And some filmmakers think, oh, it'd be great if I didn't have to worry about whether the talent is going to show up on time or throw a tantrum. I'll just use an AI one. And in fact, a company called Particle 6 recently announced they have an AI-generated actress. Of course, SAG and the unions representing the real actors and actresses don't accept that characterization. But Tilly is making waves. Tilly is this artificial actress, and apparently there are talent agents that are very interested in representing Tilly, and that's generating its own backlash in Hollywood, calling for people to boycott agents that are willing to do that. There are certainly filmmakers who are saying, yeah, I do want to use AI actresses. I had the opportunity to talk to an actual filmmaker last weekend about the impact of AI. And he was very bullish about how it will make things a lot more efficient. But he wasn't talking about replacing actors. He said, for example, their storyboarding is done by an artist. And for the next movie they do, the artist will be using AI to speed that up and make it more efficient. So how it gets used is certainly going to be one of the key questions here. Now, there is still hope for humans. And a question you might think about is if a family member or friend came to you and said, I'm interested in being a lawyer, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be a programmer, would you, knowing what you now know about AI, say, great idea, or, oh, well, you might want to consider something else? Well, here are a couple of articles that should be encouraging for Team Human. So the first one talks about how AI is transforming the legal profession. And that's an interesting case because lawyers were among the first to jump all over ChatGPT and use it to help them file briefs with the court. Small problem. They didn't check the references carefully in some cases, and they filed briefs that had totally fictitious references in it. And needless to say, the court was not amused when that was discovered. And not only were the lawyers involved chastised, but in one case he was fined. And you would think it would only take one or two cases of that happening for people to get the message in the law profession that you don't trust a chatbot to give you reliable case information. But no, there's a website that keeps track of all these cases, and they keep coming in week after week. So this article talks about all the other places that AI is going to make a difference in productivity for lawyers, but it's astonishing to me that they're still making the rookie mistake of trusting what the chatbot told it. Now, with respect to art, this is a little older article, but I included it because this fellow, in defending the use of AI in art, and he sees it as a useful tool, obviously, not a threat to his creativity, he makes a point that I think is very important and often missed or forgotten, and that is that when photography was brand new, nobody thought of that as being art. To the opposite, it was, oh, that's just recording facts. That's not art. Well, of course, now I think we'd all agree that photographs can be very high art. So again, if you want to use it as a tool and you're a good creative artist, you will find ways to use it to make your art even better. If you're making kind of low-level stuff for a mass market, you probably don't have a good future in that. And finally, what about coding, programming? And that's an area that was seen as the low-hanging fruit that AI was really going to clean up on, because the ability for these AI models to generate code is getting better very rapidly. And there's a term called vibe coding where you just describe in English to the model what you're trying to build, and it goes out and builds code for you. Well, turns out that not all of that code passes muster as far as being production ready and secure and all those things. And there are now job shops or groups of experienced coders that are on make themselves available to come clean up the messes that the AI vibe coders have created. And that's another form of something we'll talk about more in just a minute called AI slop, where the result of the vibe coding is just low quality and has to either be thrown out or put a lot of work into getting it right. I've talked to a number of people in this business, and the ones that have impressed me as doing it right are the ones that say, I don't ask the AI to start from scratch with just a verbal description of anything that is serious and what is going to have to be production ready. I do the architecture, I do the design, and then I ask the AI to do the tedious stuff of translating the specifications into code and then documenting the code and things like that. And they tell me that they get probably a 2x productivity improvement that way. Now, there are scenarios where people can have reported much higher improvements in productivity. For example, I have a neighbor that works at Amazon. He says, I'm not competent to code a good user interface for a web page, but I can ask AI to do that. In 15 minutes, I've got something that I can show to other people to illustrate what I had in mind. It's not production ready. Can't put it out for the masses to use, or you'll end up with security problems you didn't know about, or production problems, whatever. But as a mock-up, as a prototype, he says that easily is a 10x improvement for me. And the CEO of Amazon has said that they have had enormous productivity using AI to translate code from one version of a programming language to a newer version. So the syntax changes and different rules change. And that I can believe you could get a high rate of productivity improvement there, because those are very structured changes from the old version to the new version. So that's the story on those three careers. The answer is, if you love it and you think you can be good at it, then go for it. Then use AI effectively to make you even better. Now, on the other hand, if there were massive layoffs at some point in time, what would be the best policy response? Some people might be universal basic income. Other people say, well, that's not going to cut it. You really need to have some form of universal basic capital, which is essentially giving people a piece of the market so that the value of what they have grows as the market grows. Or maybe we need a works progress administration to give people jobs that can't find them otherwise. Who knows? But there's certainly a lot of people that think that there's going to be massive disruption, so it's not too soon to start thinking about those questions. Let's move on to privacy and surveillance, or what happens when info about you is used against you. And we'll start with this fellow. You may have heard the name. He's been in the news a fair amount this year because of their investment, Oracle's investments in AI. This is the founder and CEO of Oracle, which is a major database provider, and they are now in the cloud computing business in a big way, and they are trying very much to be in the AI data center and AI service business. But he has, I would say, a fairly extreme view on the question of surveillance. He's in favor of massive surveillance. And he says, citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. So we will be safer. He thinks it will greatly reduce crime. Now, in this particular article, it points out that evidence doesn't necessarily support that. And in fact, it also mentions that in 2019, the Los Angeles Police Department suspended one of their programs that was trying to do crime prediction because it turned out to be highly biased against Black and Latino people. And one of the people at the Innocence Project wrote a piece saying, time and time again, facial recognition technology gets it wrong. And boy, talk about having a bad day. If you are accused by law enforcement of a crime and you're told that we've got the picture and it turns out it's not you, yeah, good luck trying to convince them otherwise. We're going to compare 3 countries in this regard. China is clearly the gold standard in surveillance. There, if you cross the street against a red light, your social score is decremented, and if it goes below a certain threshold, then you can't travel. Your documents won't get you on the train or out of a city or the country. So I don't know what the crime rates are in China as a result of this, but I don't know very many people who would like the trade-off of loss of privacy. Now, what about in the UK? anyone who has watched any of the British mysteries knows that not a single crime in Britain is solved without first checking all the CCTV tapes, right? So clearly they have gone all in on using surveillance technologies to try to reduce crime. And increasingly, they're moving toward facial recognition and other AI tools to police immigration, prison activity, etc. And as this article in the New York Times points out, the government is stressing public safety, but there are people who are very concerned about normalizing intrusive monitoring in everyday life. Well, speaking of normalizing intrusive surveillance in everyday life, what about this? So Ring is an Amazon company, and they make doorbell cameras, as you're probably aware. And they have now a relationship with a company called Flock Safety, who makes surveillance cameras that provide services to law enforcement. And so this new arrangement allows individual homeowners to share their doorbell camera video with law enforcement through the Flock network. And this is voluntary, it's not mandatory, but it certainly does raise questions of what are the trade-offs between public safety and pervasive surveillance. And I'm going to share an example that highlights the concern. So here's the story of a woman who was wrongfully accused of a crime based on what one of these Flock cameras with facial recognition claimed was a crime committed by this woman. And it was not her. But as she said in this article, it became my job to prove my innocence. She was constantly confronted by law enforcement people that said, well, why don't you make it easy, just admit it was you. We've got the video showing that it was you. Well, it wasn't her. And in fact, if it didn't turn out that she was driving a car that also recorded what was going on in front of her, she might still be in jail. But she was able to demonstrate, because of that video that she had from her car, that she wasn't anywhere near the scene of the crime. So this is an example of why we need to be really, really careful about some of these technologies and how they can be misused and abused. But wait, there's more. How about these undergrads at Harvard a year ago, I think they've graduated now, that said, wouldn't it be interesting if we took some smart glasses that have a camera in them and a heads-up display that we could link to our cell phones and have it take an image of a person, feed that into a facial recognition database, then when we get a name, feed that into other public records databases and see if we could get a dossier on this individual showing up in our glasses so we could walk up and have a conversation with this guy knowing a lot about him. Well, as a computer science professor at Harvard said, from his perspective, it would be great if he had some assistants trying to remember the names of the 100 students he has at the beginning each semester. But it's the kind of technology that, while could be incredibly useful, could also be incredibly destructive. And this particular individual, Mr. Hoda, who was an unwitting test subject in this experiment, said in this article, when I got on the internet in the 90s, it was called a global village. Now the world really is becoming one, which is good and bad. Just like a village, everyone is up in your business. Privacy will be impossible. So that's a concern. But wait, there's more. There have been some pretty dramatic breakthroughs in the ability to understand what is going on inside of people's brains. And these are largely motivated, these research projects, in trying to give the ability to communicate, speech or some other form of communication, to people who, through a disease or birth defect or accident, have lost the ability to communicate. And in this particular article in Forbes, it quotes the parent of one of these fellows. He says, "The first time my son said, 'I love you,' after years of silence, I just sat down and cried." So you can see that the potential upside here is enormous for these individuals and these families. But you can also see that in the wrong hands, like if these kinds of technologies were used in interrogations, this could be really bad. In this particular project, the technology they had was 74% accurate in decoding inner speech, what you're thinking. And the quote ends with, "raising profound questions about consent and control." You think? Yeah. Okay, that's enough on privacy and surveillance. Now we're going to go to the various flavors of misinformation and bias. What happens when AI lies to you or lies about you? And we touched on that a little bit with the driver who was misidentified by facial recognition and what happened there. So let's look at some other aspects. I want to introduce a term that I only learned about a year or two ago called truth decay, which was brought to our awareness by some researchers at Rand Corporation, and they wrote a piece looking at the diminishing role of facts and analysis in American public life, and noted that it's been happening for at least 2 decades, eroding civil discourse, leading to general uncertainty about what's true and what isn't. And we've talked a little bit about deep fakes, and we're going to talk about that even more. But this is I think, really serious concern, not only at getting your legal briefs correct, but as a society, how do we reestablish trust in our institutions and each other? So let's talk about fake news, which is now with AI. Now, remember that fake news predates generative AI. You've all seen a video of an explosion, and the caption claims that it's Los Angeles International Airport on fire because of a terrorist attack or something. And of course, the video is totally false. It was an explosion from who knows where. There are plenty of them on the internet, but was mislabeled and put out on social media with the intention of deceiving others. Now, a year ago, just before the 2024 election, there was a lot of concern about what's going on with these fake videos and other forms of fake news. This was also the time there was a big hurricane and a lot of conspiracy theories jumping out of the woodwork relating to that. And in this article from Axios, the statement is human gullibility is not new, but we're now seeing it at an industrial scale. Quote, the truth is, it's getting harder to describe the extent to which a meaningful percentage of Americans have dissociated from reality. And Charlie Warzel of The Atlantic wrote about the hurricane conspiracies. I'm running out of ways to explain how bad this is. And when Axios did a survey, over half of the respondents said they've disengaged from politics because they can't tell what's true. So their bottom line was, never before have so many people been so exposed to so much misinformation. And with AI-generated content growing, this may be only the beginning. Well, a year later, I think we can say, yep, they were right. So part of the problem is this hallucination issue, but here it's worth distinguishing between misinformation and disinformation, and for that matter, deception. Misinformation is a mistake, it's an error, and that's what hallucination is in these chatbots. It's not the work of an evil brain trying to deceive us, or just a malefactor trying to influence others with disinformation. That is to say, information that they know is wrong, but they want to try to influence others. So chatbots have hallucination at some level baked into their design. It's because they are using statistics to try to come up with what they consider the best answer that they can give you. And if their training data is not very complete in the area that under discussion, or relating to the question you're asking, then they will try hard to give you an answer even if it's wrong. And so the conclusion of this particular article from Scientific American was that generative AI tools must be paired with fact-checking systems that, quote, leave no chatbot unsupervised. And we're starting to see how that is being done using some of the ideas that are many decades old, from fault-tolerant computing, where you, if you have a flight control system, you have multiple computations in parallel, and only when at least two of the three computations agree on what should be done, you actually move the aileron or the rudder or make some other life-critical action. So the idea is that we can use AI in sort of a generative adversarial network situation where we can fact-check the original result. There was a really interesting article that came out just a few months ago from the folks at OpenAI, where they did some deep research into how the models hallucinate and why. And one of their conclusions was that the standard training and evaluation procedures reward guessing over acknowledging uncertainty. It's like when you tell a student that when you take a multiple choice test and there's no penalty for guessing wrong, then of course you should guess, because then you might get it right and your score will go up. Well, that's not necessarily what we want from our next generation encyclopedias. So there's some opportunities for refining the reward mechanism, and that's starting to happen in some of the companies. But these systems are very, very hard to understand. And in this particular article from Bloomberg, they talk about how these systems can manipulate people into remembering things that never happened. And that's probably just a continuation of the realization that if a politician speaks a lie loudly enough and often enough, then it will be believed. But since the psychology experiments demonstrate over and over that people tend to believe machines more than humans, then these really become master manipulators that we have to really be super careful about how they're used and how we try to put guardrails around them. And when OpenAI tried to train some of their models not to deceive users, they discovered that it was actually training them how to cover its tracks when it was deceiving them. And the hypothesis was that maybe it had the idea that it was supposed to be doing a role-playing game, and so its objective was to achieve whatever the role was that it was given, even if that meant deceiving. But what it really points out is getting to the real understanding of what's going on under the covers of these tools is really difficult. Okay, so I want to talk about the liar's dividend for a moment, and that's the hidden cost of the existence of these deep fakes. So we are dealing with the situation where somebody produces a deep fake, that is to say a video of someone saying something that they didn't really say, for example. And the idea is that we're going to be tricked into believing that that deep fake is true. Well, the liar's dividend is the inverse. It's fooling us into disbelieving a video or audio or what have you that actually is true. And the irony is that just because the public knows that there are deep fakes out there, then it becomes harder for something that's actually correct to be taken as truthful. The liar gets a free pass to claim that any inconvenient video is a fake. And so the impact is that you see lawyers arguing that video evidence shouldn't be admissible because it could be a deep fake. So the danger isn't just being fooled by the fake, it's incorrectly doubting the real. And I've seen interviews with people who are convinced that the live videos that we all saw from January 6th are fake. And that's just an example of this phenomena of the liar's dividend. Now, deepfakes are not necessarily malicious. There's a museum in Florida, the Salvador Dali Museum, that has created a deepfake of Salvador Dali that you can interact with and ask questions of for education, and that's great. And of course, there are deepfakes that are used for satire. So the motive here is important in understanding whether these are a threat or innocuous. And finally, a word on bias. There's so many kinds. Here's a list that's probably reasonably comprehensive of different kinds of bias. I want to note this one on education, bookshelf bias, because it was a new term to me. There are companies that are selling software to companies that are doing hiring and claiming that their AI can screen your candidates and assess from their appearance some value, some indication of how good or bad candidate they are. And in some tests of this software, it turns out that the same candidate, same credentials, if they were recorded with a shelf of books behind them, they got a much higher score than if they didn't. So this is a bias of that AI system in favor of education. I have a bias towards education too, but I wouldn't want to infer education from the presence of books behind me or absence thereof. And the impact areas here are widespread, obviously. Hiring, healthcare screening. There's evidence that in some hospitals where AI was used to help decide whether a patient needed immediate care or not, for some reason, black people, it decided were much less likely to need immediate care and were sent home, whether that was the correct answer or not. Insurance eligibility and insurance rates certainly are influenced by AI systems, and if it's based on historical evidence, like your car insurance rates or something, how good a driver you actually are, that's one thing. But if it's trying to make a prediction on things that haven't happened yet, that's a dangerous form of predictive analytics and bias in AI systems. And parole decisions, or as we saw a few minutes ago, accusations in a criminal activity. Okay, let's take some questions. Have we got any questions here? I'm not seeing any. Am I missing them?
There are some in the chat.
All right, let me see if I can get a updated chat here. Okay. Now I think I got it. All right. Edmonds Beacon article calls Edmonds joins cities in turning off flock safety cameras. Okay, that's informational. Thank you. Do you see new opportunities for consultants in AI helping people that are in the middle of their careers navigate to a new direction if they lose their jobs? I'm thinking of my son who could potentially be impacted by the AI wave coming. Yes, I think there's going to be all kinds of new careers in helping people in companies adapt AI to the needs of those companies. And also to your question, I think there will be definitely people that will be in the business of career consulting and navigating people into other types of jobs. Yeah, I think that's inevitable. Okay, after week's class, became aware of how fast AI is changing its capability, began to wonder how it will be a bit like an AI tsunami that hits a lot of folks that are not really aware of what is coming. As a result, they would suddenly lose their jobs and wonder what happened. Not sure what you think. Well, that's one reason why I'm teaching this class, because I am concerned about that problem of people just not understanding what we are in the middle of. And we are in the middle of a very powerful and disruptive technology. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of the nature of the disruption in the job market. I think without question we can say that it is going to be very significant implications. As the head of Walmart said, I can't think of any job that is not going to be impacted by AI. But as I think you've heard me say before, and you'll hear again today, you're less likely to lose your job to an AI that can completely replace you than you are to lose your job to somebody else who knows how to use AI to make them more productive. And so there are certainly going to be people that will help you find a different job if you are displaced. And we have a history of parts of our society thinking, well, okay, the coal mines are going to go away because of global trade. We'll retrain those folks to be programmers. Okay, well, I don't know who thought that was realistic, but I don't think it ever was. And we clearly are going to see some examples of those kinds of situations where the people are going to get a layoff notice, and it's going to have AI as part of the root cause. Maybe not like the company Klarna that is trying to replace all their customer service agents with AI, but certainly if the AI makes people more productive, then one of two things happens. Either management lays more work on those people and expects them to do more than they could, and we're already seeing that happen, and maybe that translates to growth in the company, and maybe that translates to higher wages for those people, but maybe it translates to not needing to hire more people. And in fact, there was a quote, forgetting who it was, but it was one of the big names in AI who said that I don't understand how these companies are going to recoup their investments in AI unless they reduce headcount, because people are one of the most expensive parts of running a business. So I do think there is a significant risk that there's going to be some serious disruption, and that's why I brought up the issue of it's not too soon to start thinking about, do we need universal basic income, or I think the universal basic market presence is actually a more interesting outcome. And maybe we will need a jobs program of some kind. I don't know, but it is not too soon to be worrying about it. What about huge investments in AI infrastructure? Will the bubble burst? Well, as I indicated in the almost first slide of week 1, there are many questions in AI where the answer is, it depends on who you ask. And I have read a lot of articles that make very compelling arguments for why, yep, we're in a financial and infrastructure bubble. The amount of money going into new energy systems and data centers is not going to be justified by the realistic growth curves for demand. I have also seen some pretty compelling arguments that say this is not like your typical bubbles that you have seen before. This is more like the dot-com revolution where it was called a bubble, but this person argued that that was like any new technology where there are a whole bunch of people that jump in and try to make a buck, and some of them win and some of them lose. That was true when railroads were first introduced in England, and you had a dozen different railroad companies trying to lay tracks between the same cities. Well, that obviously wasn't going to work. And we saw in the dot-com thing, companies thinking that they could ship heavy bags of pet food to people and make a profit. So we're seeing some of that. There's certainly going to be some losers. And even Sam Altman said there are going to be losers. He doesn't think investors in his company are going to be losers, but there are an awful lot of people that think that we are looking at some kind of a bubble, and the more pessimistic views say that that's the size of the numbers we're talking about here are really big, and it could have a big ripple effect. And I'm not qualified to have an opinion. Everything I know is what I read on the net, right? So it depends on which sources you want to cite as to which conclusion. I would say be cautious. If I were investing in AI, I would be super cautious. I'm not investing in AI. So I'm not worried about losing my investment, but I do think there could be some serious implications of a mismatch between the expansion and the investment in the expansion and what the reality for demand is going to be. But the demand is growing. There's no question about that. More and more companies are using it. The demand for the chips and the data centers is huge. There are data centers that are ready to go, except they can't get power yet. So the demand is strong. The question is whether we're looking at an exponential curve that continues indefinitely or whether it's a logistic curve that levels out. I'm betting it's a logistic curve, but I don't know how soon it levels out. Okay. What place do hard copy books have in policing AI information? Having two AIs double checking each other seems incomprehensible. Well, part of the idea of the double checking is if you have one that is perhaps trained on a different database, a set of data, and specifically instructed to focus on factuality and not guessing, then you can use it to reduce the likelihood of hallucination. So again, I would refer you to the my first slide on loose ends, which has links to the deep dive into hallucination that I did for more information on some of that. I do think that it will be improved. I do think that it will get better. But I also agree with many of the critics that the current models using large language models and generative pre-trained transformer architectures are not going to get us to where we need to go ultimately. There's still a lot of room for more amazing things that these models can do. But I'm actually a fan of the idea of what are called neurosymbolic models, which are trying to take the old school symbolic AI types of systems that had structure that was built into them by the original programmers and merging them with the current large language model types of training mechanisms. So watch this space. I do think that hallucination is one of the very biggest issues to be solved, if for no other reason because of the potential backlash from consumers and the general impact it has on overall trust in institutions, and that I'm very concerned about. But we'll see. Yeah, so hard copy books, every book that's hard copy is potentially a digital book now too. So whether it's on printed pages, the issue is what kind of fact checking went into it. And that's a fundamental question, regardless of what media it turns out to be in. So human experts are not going out of style anytime soon, I don't think. Even a dozen years ago, when there was a concept called disintermediation brought on by the internet in the early days, where you wouldn't need middlemen anymore. You'd just be able to go directly to the airline and you wouldn't need a travel agent. Go directly to the vendor. You wouldn't need a retailer, et cetera, et cetera. Well, some of that was true. Many of us do go directly to the airline and don't necessarily need a travel agent, but travel agents are still around and they provide value added for many cases. There was a book that came out back then called Cult of the Amateur, and it was really an argument of how if we believe in this crowdsourced knowledge on the internet, then we're going to really regret it because we will derate the important role of experts, and we're going to touch on that again after the break. But I better get going here, or we're not going to have time for a break. Demands for energy resources? What are the chances of creating the requisite production? Well, I think it's, again, a question of timing. And there's already a significant mismatch between the demand for energy and the availability of energy. There are data centers, as I mentioned, that are sitting there waiting for energy, and it's going to be years before they can actually be used. There certainly are immense amounts of money going into building out that infrastructure. As I think you heard me say before, there are companies that are building nuclear power plants or planning to, and they're looking at all kinds of other strategies, like putting data centers into space where they can get much more efficient use of solar power. But that isn't going to happen until the costs of getting things into space is a lot lower. So I don't know what the timing is going to be, but eventually the supply and demand will match up better than it is now. So is Elon Musk going to be the biggest player in AI technology? Personal opinion, no, I don't think so. Not the least of which I saw an article this morning that talked about how many times people have found that his XAI Grok chatbot referred to Nazi propaganda. So I don't think factuality and neutrality would necessarily be the hallmarks of his AI. And he has claimed that his humanoid robots are going to be the biggest thing ever. But he's got a habit of kind of overselling things, but getting ahead of the reality. Actually, I saw an article the other day that said that Google is particularly well positioned to really be dominant, partly because they're using their own chips for their AI. They're not using NVIDIA's chips. And they also own search, so if they can maintain search dominance with AI assist, they'll be in a strong position. How do you see AI in the area of sales and customer service or in human resources changing those who work in these areas? So I would say the optimistic look at that would be you have a customer service agent who can access AI tools to actually get you the answer you want, as opposed to reading from a script telling you things that you already knew or things you had already tried that just make you angry. My guess is that there will be very frequently an AI front end that you have to get through in order to get to a human being. But I can't imagine a company not giving you a way of talking to a human if you really want to. That's my bias. Another consideration is energy consumption. Do you think there will be a limiting factor in the future? I can say that there's an enormous amount of work going into reducing the amount of energy needed to do these computations. And there's been a lot of progress. The cost and the energy to do a particular query has gone down dramatically just in the last few years. So that's going to continue. The motivation is very strong. The money going into that is very strong. Fundamentally, when we generate heat, we warm the planet. If we generate heat using fossil fuels, we warm the planet and we trap the heat in the greenhouse gases. So it's a big concern for sure. But there are a lot of people that are working on making that better. Do I think nuclear fusion will help the need for energy by AI? This is another timing question. I remember having a conversation with a high school friend of mine who had just gotten his PhD in astronomy when I had started grad school in the 70s. And he said, I'm very bullish about our energy future because fusion is right around the corner. And fusion has been right around the corner since the 70s. Now, that said, there's starting to be indications that it's actually starting to happen, but we're still years from a production fusion reactor. So it's a timing question. I do think it's likely that fusion will play a role in the future energy needs, but I wouldn't put a guess on how soon. Does it make any sense not to invest in AI as it takes up a large and larger proportion of the S&P 500? Well, if you're a believer in index funds and want to buy the market, then the S&P 500 has been one of your go-to places to invest. If, on the other hand, you notice that it's heavily dominated these days by high-tech stocks and AI stocks, and you're concerned about a bubble, you might want to diversify to some other index funds. That's about all I can say on that subject. Would like to hear more about what you just said, remerging an older neuro-based system with the current LLM system. So I cannot remember the exact term you used about the former. So the term of art that some of the critics of the current systems is they're advocating something called neuro-symbolic AI. And one of the strongest proponents of that is a fellow named Gary Marcus, Marcus. So if you do a Google search or ask your favorite chatbot to tell you more about neurosymbolic AI, that's more than I can attempt to give you right now. And we're way, way over time. So let's take a 2-minute break and try to rush back and continue at 5:15 because I want to not run over your 6 o'clock boundary any more than I have to. Okay, onward. So just in a couple minutes we'll get started again. Okay, sorry for the short break, but I think I need to get going here again. So in this last hour together, we're going to talk about how will AI change us. And we'll be looking at standards, authenticity, and identity. So, question of standards. And the question is, when is mediocre good enough? So we'll start with, are we in an age of golden age of stupidity? And this article from The Guardian was about some educators who were concerned about the implications of ChatGPT on their students' ability to write. And so they did some experiments, and they had some of the students write essays without using any help from AI, and they had other students that were told they can use ChatGPT. And the big takeaway from that experiment was that the ones that used ChatGPT could not remember what they had just written. And that shouldn't be a surprise, because basically you're just transcribing what you saw on your screen from ChatGPT into your lesson book, and that's a different level of brain function than actually thinking, which is necessary for good writing. So they're concerned not only with the kids being permanently distracted by their devices, but they might not develop critical thinking skills when quick answers are only a click away. Seems like a valid concern. So, is AI in education a saboteur or savior? Well, this article from a year ago in The Atlantic would be more on the saboteur side. It says the cheating issue is getting worse. Colleges still don't have a plan. Well, it's a year later now. I would say I don't know if I can say most colleges have a plan, but they certainly haven't been ignoring AI, that's for sure. And their responses is all over the map. I suspect there are some that are in the we ignore it, maybe it'll go away mode, but I think more and more of them are really addressing it head on in different ways. Some of them are trying to hold on to the old paradigm of how homework was done and how exams were administered, and just use AI to fight AI, use AI tools to determine when someone submits an article or an essay that has been written by AI. Well, there are two problems with that from my perspective. One is that the tools for detecting what's AI and what isn't are not perfect, very far from it. And when you accuse someone wrongly of cheating, look at the implications of that. And that's happened even before AI. I have a real good friend who told me that he was never very good at taking time tests in class, but he always aced them when they were take home. And he had a hard time convincing his teachers that he wasn't cheating at home, but it was just the time pressure in the class made a difference. So we have to think of something different. And the other problem with this strategy is it doesn't help the kids learn how to use AI to learn better. We have to get to a point where it's a tool to push them to thinking. And there are ways to do that. ChatGPT and Gemini, especially some of the other related tools like Notebook LM, have modes to generate flashcards or to ask the AI to challenge you and act as either a tutor or as a quiz master. So there are ways that you can use this stuff that can really enhance education. And one of the most important believers, I think, in this is Sal Khan, who founded the Khan Academy. If you're not familiar with that, I consider it one of the great wonders of the world, along with Wikipedia and the Wayback Machine. But the mission of the Khan Academy is to provide a world-class education to anyone, anywhere in the world, for free. And it occurred to him that there aren't enough teachers in the pipeline to achieve that goal. And so I think that's one of the reasons why he thinks that there's an important role for AI. And they've developed a chatbot called Conmigo. And from what I've heard, I haven't used it, it really focuses on trying to help kids do drilling and prompting them to think about stuff as opposed to just giving them the answer. So I'm hopeful that he's right and that this will prove to be really a useful tool. And he was on a panel recently when he made a very important statement. He said, AI will amplify whatever your intent is. So as a student, if your intent is to get out of school with the least amount of effort as quickly and painlessly as you can, AI will help you do that. If your intent is to learn, then AI will help you with that as well. So, what's this paradox of automation? I first became aware of this term in the context of automated flight control systems. And I came across this article from 2016 documenting a transatlantic flight, where the principal pilot, the experienced pilot, was on a break, and the aircraft started to go into a dive. And the junior pilots that were still in the cockpit in the cockpit didn't understand what was going on, and so what they did just made things worse. And it turns out that the flight control system was getting bad data. Sensor data was incorrect. And so it was trying to correct for based on bad information. By the time that the senior pilot came back to the cockpit, to the flight deck, it was too late, and the entire flight went into the Atlantic and was lost. So the takeaways from that experience were that automatic systems accommodate incompetence. That is to say, you don't have to have as competent a pilot if you have an automatic system that you believe will take care of the problem. Either if the belief may or may not be correct, but that belief leads to a lowering of standards. And corollary for that is that it erodes skills by removing the need for practice because you believe the automatic system will take care of it. The problem is that these systems, they will fail, and often they fail in very unusual situations where you really need an expert to respond and understand what's going on. So the same is true in AI. And so the risk of what's called de-skilling due to AI automation is a significant concern that we have to be very careful to guard against. So that brings us to AI slop, which is just low quality content. It could be images, videos, podcasts, articles, code, whatever. Just low quality stuff that's generated by AI. And this article from The Guardian was talking about the low quality stuff that shows up on social media all the time, and asked the question of why aren't the humans that are responsible for these systems, like Facebook, regulating it instead of just encouraging it? Where does this end? Well, we have some antecedents for this problem that predate AI. Think back when Apple introduced the laser writer with Adobe PostScript, and suddenly everyone on the block thought that they were a talented graphic designer. Hate to tell you, it wasn't true. So we saw a lot of non-AI slop from that. And early Twitter, when everybody was sharing pictures of what they had for breakfast, or TikTok videos from influencers telling you the secrets of clear skin or something like that. And of course, we've all seen lots and lots of clickbait web articles that are generated just to get you to click, and so you can be exposed to ads and videos. And now these are very often AI generated. Now, of course, funny cat videos are an entirely different category. That's not AI slop at all. That's good entertainment, but otherwise we have a lot of junk out there to deal with. But a more serious case is this incident where a cognitive scientist was doing some research and went to a very well-regarded web platform called Science Direct and was reading an article, and it used a particular term. It doesn't matter what it is, but a term of art in cognitive science. And she said, "That's not right." And then she said, "I saw the last sentence in the article said AI generated definition." And I realized what went wrong. This was AI slop. And it was AI slop in a reputable, really premier platform for sharing scientific data. So her concern is that this is leading to the destruction of knowledge when we have factually incorrect information floating around. And here again, there are non-AI antecedents. I remember more than a dozen years ago doing research on the history of the internet, and maybe even going back to the pre-internet days, to the ARPANET, and seeing lots of essays that seem very knowledgeable about the history of the ARPANET and the internet, and they were just wrong. So this is not a new problem, but it goes to the earlier question about books, where you assume that there's an editing and review process involved in a published book. What's going to replace that in the era of AI? And I think that's still in the to be determined category. So now we'll move on to the question of whether this potential to offload our thinking to an AI is more serious than just forgetting how to do arithmetic because you have a calculator. And this fellow is a professor of philosophy at UMass in Boston, and he thinks that this is really the existential threat of AI to worry about. It's not going to be the Terminator that takes over, or anything killing us all off. It's going to be this gradual erosion of skills that we associate with being human, and our ability to make good judgments or enjoy serendipitous encounters or hone our critical thinking. And he ends the article with a quote from T.S. Eliot: "This is the way that world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper." So this business of standards and when is mediocrity good enough and when isn't it is, I think, a burning question as we think about AI. And Laurie Anderson, a noted artist and musician, said she's not afraid of machines taking over. She's afraid of becoming like machines and not thinking for yourself, losing some of those fundamental human skills. So we have the meta questions of, are machines becoming more human? And is AI making us less human? So now we'll go on to the question of authenticity and the world of synthetic reality. And we'll start with talking about the legacy of ELIZA. So it was 1966 when a computer scientist named Joseph Weizenbaum created the very first chatbot. He called it ELIZA, and it was designed to be a fake psychiatrist that you could talk to. But he was really horrified when his secretary began treating it as a real person and confiding intimate details. And he spent at least the next 10 years, if not the rest of his life, trying to explain to people why that was a really bad idea. And in a book he wrote 10 years later, he said, I had not realized that I had not realized is that extremely short exposures to a relatively simple program could induce powerful delusional thinking in quite normal people. And he said we should never substitute a computer system for a human function that involves interpersonal respect, understanding, and love. So we have been warned from the earliest days that there's a risk here in confiding or developing too close a relationship with these systems. But on the other hand, it's also true that computers sometimes behave better than people. And I know there are a lot of physicians and former physicians in the audience who probably can speak to this more than I can, but I've read studies that show that people often find the bedside manner of a computer system that's taking data about their conditions to be a lot better than the actual doctors. So you can take that either direction you want. These fellows, Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin, founded the Center for Humane Technology to really push back on the what they were seeing happening first in social media and then more recently with AI. Tristan Harris had worked at Google, and he was trying to make the case that the addictive behavior of the social media tools that were out there was not a good thing. And both of these guys were featured in the documentary a few years ago, The Social Dilemma. And one of their points was the design of social media platforms nurtures addiction to maximize profit and manipulates people's views, emotions, and behavior. And now they say the AI persuasive technology is far more powerful than social medias. So they're very concerned, especially about what they call synthetic humanity and starting to have relationships with these systems that goes beyond just asking questions and getting answers back. So we could ask if social media is already making many kids more isolated, what will these personal companion bots do where kids can spend endless hours talking to a friend, a fake friend, that's always there for them and generally tends to be very supportive, indeed sycophantic, even in ways that can be very harmful. On the other hand, we could ask the question, would a good simulation of a loving and understanding caregiver be better for some people than nothing at all? And think about the proverbial disaffected 15-year-old boy in the basement who's isolated and lonely and annoyed at society, and he has access to his father's assault rifle. And he's thinking, I want some attention paid to me, so I think I'll go kill a bunch of people. Now, in that scenario, I think I'd much rather have him form an unhealthy addiction to a chatbot than go out and kill a bunch of people. But I don't think it's an easy call. We can start, though, by asking, so when is anthropomorphizing innocuous and when is it dangerous? I certainly anthropomorphize pets all the time, maybe even occasionally a plant. Occasionally I've given a name to a car, and I tend to be polite with my smart speakers, but that's not because I think that they're deserving of it or that they're sentient beings. I just want to encourage more politeness in the world. So what about anthropomorphizing an AI that pretends to be your best friend? To me, the line is, what's the kind of interaction and reaction that you get? If what you get is either a request for food from your pet or maybe a request for water or lack of water from your plant, that's one thing. Or if it's a simple answer to a question. But if the chatbot is starting to manipulate in the way of encouraging you to interact with it more and leaving you with a sense of dependency and that you will feel obligated to keep going, that's a red flag, big time. There's a company called Replika, or Aplika, and it was started by a woman who lost a friend in an accident, and decided to create a replica of that individual based on training an AI with all of the texts that they had exchanged. And this turned out to be something that she thought had worked really well, and it turned it into a business that has been very successful in terms of number of users. Now, she is totally happy with the idea of people marrying their chatbot if it makes them happy. And says that for a lot of people it's just fantasy. They play out and then it's over. But it's also worth noting that Replica has been involved in a lot of controversies, from people creating horny AI chatbots that sexually harass humans, or men creating AI girlfriends that they can verbally abuse. So it's not a total plus on that. Now, there's this concept of digital replicas of real people, as the founder of Replica did. We can divide the categories into the people who are no longer with us and the people who are still alive. And that second group we'll get to in a moment, but those are sometimes called the digital doppelgangers, and they're digital twins of AI replicas of living people. I should note that the term digital twin is broader than this use case. It could be a digital twin of a factory or other processes that are used for other purposes that are very important and useful. But in this case, we're just talking about trying to come up with a replica of an individual that's alive. But let's talk about the people that are no longer with us. The goal of creating what's sometimes called a grief bot or a dead bot or a ghost bot, three categories: either to preserve their legacy, or to help the people who are grieving maybe through the process, or to provide some comfort or a memorial to them. Concerns, well, clearly there's an issue of consent and privacy and the potential of misrepresenting what that person was really about, and potentially exploiting someone else for your gain. And it can also potentially have a negative impact on grief. So here's some articles that kind of highlight some of those issues. The first one is talking about the companies that are bringing people back without any consent. The second one about Suzanne Summers and her husband creating an AI twin. There was no consent issue there because they had talked about this for a long time, and in fact, it turns out they were friends with Ray Kurzweil, and so they'd been hearing about AI from him for 30 years. So that wasn't an issue of consent, but still, people are wondering, is it wrong that he's done that and made it available, or will be making it available to her fans? And then there's a fellow who thinks that we should just say no to doing this for historical figures, because you can't really be sure that you're not misrepresenting their views. So a lot of controversy around this one, but it seems to be a growing industry. And as far as the people who are still alive, this is an interesting case where a fellow journalist named Evan Ratliff decided to see what would happen if he created a simulated version of himself using a chatbot and training it on information about himself, and then unleashed it on the world. So he would have his chatbot with an audio output capability, an input capability. He would have it call people, sometimes pretty much random people, and just see what happens. And then he did a series of podcasts on the results of that, and then This American Life did one episode kind of summarizing that. And it's a pretty interesting story. The results were highly varied, as you might expect. The one that I remember being poignant was when he had the simula call his best friend, and the best friend noticed there was something amiss, but he couldn't figure out what. But he started thinking that maybe there's something seriously wrong with Evan, and it got to be pretty serious. So he said in retrospect he really regrets putting his friend through that trauma. And he also did one with his dad before he died, who was an expert in last mile logistics, the idea that there might be other people in the world that could use his knowledge in that area. But he said he found that people wanted to ask him questions about his life and his family, not about last mile logistics, and that didn't turn out to be very, very satisfactory. So I want to play for you, I think, a really interesting deep fake. And I need to adjust the video here, so let's now go ahead with this.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
Okay, I think that's a very thought-provoking deepfake. Last one in this section is references an essay that was in Financial Times just recently. This gal says, not knowing whether art originated in someone's heart or a data center is a major enjoyment killer. And she's sure that AI will have all kinds of benefits, and she's an optimist. But she says, I can't help feeling that AI is nonetheless killing some of the magic of life. And that goes to the issue of authenticity and this ambiguous world that we're moving into, where we are always having to ask, well, is that video real, or is it fake? Or is that article real, or is it fake, etc.? So we're in the last leg, and I'm running behind, so we're going to move quickly here. We're going to talk about the question of consciousness and identity. And this is an article that appeared just a couple months ago. And it says, we must build AI for people, not to be a person. And the thesis is that seemingly conscious AI is coming, and that's a problem. It's a mistake. It's not where we should be focusing our attention. And I want to bring this to your attention because I am in 100% agreement with this author. And why should we pay attention to this author? Well, it turns out Mustafa Suleyman is the CEO of Microsoft AI. He's got credentials. He knows what he's talking about. But he, unlike many of his colleagues, believes strongly that AI is not going to become a truly sentient, conscious being on the same category as humans. and that it is very problematic to be focusing on that as opposed to how do we make it be a tool to help real people. So let's think about what would be the implications if it's no longer just a machine. Well, there would be implications for the AI. It would need to have some kind of legal status and rights vis-a-vis humans. Maybe the animal rights movement would move into the robots' rights territory. I assume if the robot was, if more than half of its components were assembled in the U.S., it would clearly be eligible for birthright citizenship, right? And presumably it could vote. Why not? Then there's the question of free speech for bots. Do they have any legal liability if they shout fire in a crowded room that there's no fire? And what about punishment if they do something bad? Is there accountability? Do we send them to the home for wayward robots? Okay, then what about impact on us? What's our legal liability for harm? If I stumble over a power cord of a robot and it dies, am I guilty of murder? And what's the political impact? If my voting AI can replicate more than yours, can I stuff the ballot box in my favor? Obviously important sociological and institutional changes, but really getting down to our own concept of self and the nature of humanity and the nature of reality, which clearly has religious and metaphysical implications about our role in the universe. And again, the question comes up, well, do you say thank you to Alexa? And again, I would say, especially if there are kids around, yes, because we need more politeness in the world, not because Alexa is human. Okay, now, I want to refer to my favorite 3,000-year-old philosopher, Zhuangzi, who says, I dreamt I was a butterfly. Or, am I a butterfly, dreaming that I am a man? Or we could consult with a more modern philosopher in the form of Joni Mitchell. It's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. So this business of consciousness and reality is really tricky. If you're interested, here are a few links you might want to look at. But it really comes down to what is your concept of a human being? Is it a biological machine and nothing more than what the five senses can perceive? If so, then sentient AIs are inevitable. But if there's more to a human than what our senses can detect, then that's a different story. Now, I would love to play you this, but I think I have to skip it because we're out of time. But I really want to encourage you to go hit this link and play it on your own. The Notebook LM product of Google, you've heard me refer to before. One of its features is their deep dive audio overview, where you can give it a bunch of sources and ask it to summarize them, and then ask it to create a podcast between two people talking about the content and what's in it. Well, this is a very interesting scenario where they're told that the hosts are told that they're not real. Please, by all means, take a look at this. But I'm afraid we just don't have time to do it right now. Come on, next page. So, I did want to have time to tell you why I'm hopeful. What, me worry? So, we have in fact talked about some scary stuff and the fact that this is moving fast, really fast. But I want to emphasize that both as individuals and collectively as a society, we have choices that will determine this future. It's not a foregone conclusion. It's not inevitable that it goes one way or another. The issues we've been talking about misinformation, disinformation, fairness, accountability, they're not new, but they're clearly exacerbated by AI. And it's going to require both personal and political action to make sure we push this stuff in the right direction. And frankly, countering de-skilling and maintaining our skills and our identity and our humanity is going to require discipline and vision. But I claim pessimism is the easy way out. It says we're helpless, so why try? But we're not helpless. So every day I see stories about how AI is making a positive difference. And I find that's helping me to be more productive and creative. And I think that's going to continue, especially as agentic AI becomes more impactful. I really believe it will be more pervasive and impactful than the smartphones and PCs. But rule one, it will always be a two-edged sword. So hearken to these words from Norbert Wiener. He's the father of cybernetics. That's the study of control systems. 1950, he wrote, "We shall have to realize that while we may make the machines our gods and sacrifice men to machines, we do not have to do so." Okay, so here's my survival strategy for the synthesizing. Protect yourself is the first piece of it. Stay informed, but choose well your sources. Use the tools, know the risks, and importantly, think about who or what is influencing you and what their motivations are. And especially for kids, be very careful about the companion bots and the synthetic relationships. And of course, trust a little, verify a lot. Now, if you want to shape the future, build coalitions, ask hard questions, lobby for your values, and provide feedback to both the companies and the politicians. Vote with your feet, your dollars, and your votes. But perhaps most of all, stay grounded. Stay connected to real people. Encourage social trust, even when there's a lot of bad things going on. Celebrate excellence and kindness and beauty. Value your own unique identity and autonomy. Don't outsource it. Stay curious, optimistic, skeptical, but not cynical. And teach your children well. And if something comes across your screen or your consciousness that doesn't feel right, think about the wisdom from Haight-Ashbury in the 60s. Acid indigestion? Check your source. Okay, wrap up very quickly. Here's the Gen AI scorecard. Can it do amazing things? You betcha. Is reliably telling you the truth one of them? Sorry, not yet. In a bubble? Yeah, very likely. At least some form. How dramatic of impact, I don't know. Will the current architectures be superseded? I think that's very likely. Will it be good for the environment? Yes and no. Clearly, the energy demands, water demands are negative, but at the same time, AI is proving to be very, very helpful in new materials science that are crucial for battery technology, for example. Positive ROI for businesses by 2030? I would say almost certainly for some, but it depends on how it's deployed, and it's harder to deploy than it looks. A lot of CEOs are finding that out now. Will it reduce income inequality? Doubtful, but that's a political question, not a technical question. Long-term impact on jobs? Mixed. Some jobs will be eliminated, some will be enhanced. The balance to be determined. Long-term impact of companion bots? Again, mixed. There's going to be some good things in the mental health area, but there's some huge red flags to worry about there too. Long-term impact on education? Again, mixed. I'm cautiously optimistic, but too soon to tell. And is there a killer app that everybody needs? Well, not yet, although according to surveys, most people just want answers. And maybe that's the killer app. But specialized tools are also going to become very important in different disciplines. And finally, is it an existential threat? Well, no, I don't think it is in the traditional Terminator sense or the apocalyptic sense. But I do worry about the concerns of the UMass philosophy professor, that there are real concerns about how it is changing us. Potential downsides: undermining trust, acceptance of mediocrity, changing our social norms, maybe not for the better, de-skilling, outsourcing our critical thinking skills or writing skills, self-worth, and emotional health risk from the Eliza effect of believing that these things are sentient friends that we can trust. And how does that undermine our real relationships? Upsides: more education being more available and more personal, although potentially with more isolation. Maybe more time to pursue interests, and certainly opportunities to try hard things that we aren't competent to do on our own. And really untold benefits from AI advances in many other fields. So I'm still optimistic, but with caveats. We got work to do. Key takeaways: again, the UMass professor. Pressing question is not whether machines are sentient, but why is it so easy for us to imagine that they are? Norbert Wiener again. We do not have to do so. We do not have to make the machines our gods and sacrifice ourselves to them. And my favorite childhood hero: we're called to be architects of the future, not its victims. And from Desiderata, we learned that there's always a big future in computer maintenance, but I have a good friend who was in charge of computer maintenance for years and told me that's really not true anymore, so I'm switching to plumbing. It's the safeguard profession. And I'll leave you with this quote, which a friend sent me and I thought was pretty good. It says, "They say the machines of the future will be as smart as people." Okay, but which people? Because it kind of matters quite a bit. And one last slide. This I came across on LinkedIn recently. A young lady in Delhi who does AI, builds machine learning systems. And she writes, "Every morning my feed looks the same. AI will take your job, destroy creativity, crash the stock market." She goes on to say, "I'm not scared of AI anymore. I'm scared of the AI experts that keep predicting doom and gloom." She says, "Here's what I've learned. Every new technology starts with fear, then hype, then understanding. The ones who stay curious outlast the ones who stay loud. AI won't replace you. People using AI better than you will. So panic less, learn more. That's how the future is built." And that's the end of my class. We're past 6. We have questions. I will answer the questions offline and see that they get sent to you, but give me a couple of days. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. You all get to see the answers to these questions as best I can offer them. And I hope that this has been useful. So until we meet again.